Welcome to the Real Estate Team Show, where we interview people and professions you need on your team. Today, we'll interview Appraiser Tammy Heeber. I'm Ed Weinberg. I've been a real estate investor for decades, and I'm an associate broker at Keller Williams. Please leave me a note below or a like or something so I know you were here. Oh, and Tammy will answer any questions you have. Just jot them down below. If you're a real estate investor or agent, new or a pro, gurus recommend you build a team. Your team members will include realtors, attorneys, home inspectors, and others. I interview people from these professions and more. We talk about what they do, how they do it, and how they're relevant for your business. You'll find videos here and on Facebook at CTRE Media. And check out our Facebook group, CTRE Investors. Today, I'm interviewing Appraiser Tammy Heeber. We'll discuss how an appraisal is done, what's a comparable, and, most important, neighborhoods. If you're an investor, you need this to determine the value of properties that you purchase. So let's get to Tammy. Yeah, I hear you. Wait a minute. And there we are. You are with us, Tammy. How are you doing?
I'm good. How about you?
Okay. So tell me, Tammy, I guess we can start with why did you decide to become an appraiser?
I was very lucky. I've always been interested in real estate, and a friend of mine was an appraiser. This is, 30 years ago. And so he mentored me. I took my classes, and I haven't looked back since. It's been a great career, and I've really enjoyed it. I find real estate fascinating.
Okay, so what do you have to do in order to become an appraiser?
So they are thinking about changing the regulations. I believe now it's at least 150 hours of coursework. I believe it's 1,000 hours of working with another appraiser and then logging all of your experience in. You have to take your exam. And I think you also have to have a 2-year degree now in order to sit for the exam, like an associate's degree or that kind of thing at a minimum.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
it's a tough business to break into because it's very hard. They've set it up so that the person wanting to be an appraiser really, it's a challenge finding a mentor. So it's a tough business to get into.
Okay. So for the first, you were saying, was it 1,000 hours?
Yeah.
You're required to work with a mentor, which means you need a licensed appraiser that you're working directly under, and you're with him.
Yeah.
You're shadowing him.
Yes, exactly.
He's
right.
giving you assignments and he's checking your assignments.
Yep. I don't believe they even allow trainees to inspect on their own. I'm not sure about that. Like I said, it's been a long time since I've gone through the approval process. So, but it's tough. But it's a great career if you can get into it.
Okay, great. And by the way, if you're watching today, if you're watching, feel free to join our Facebook group, which is at CTRE Investors. That's CTRE Investors. And we'll hear from you about what you do in a moment. All right, let's get back to business here. What's an appraisal?
An appraisal is an estimate of value, and that estimate of value is based on data, typically based on comparable sales. Comparable sales is really the meat of the appraisal, and it's the most important part. Taking the correct comparable sales and then extracting market data for adjustments. To compare your comparables and you're subject to. How much is a bath worth? How much is a garage worth? I think the most important part, though, is choosing appropriate comparable sales, because if you do that, you don't have to worry so much about the adjustments.
Okay. And a little shout out there to Mark Valente. Hey, Mark, how are you doing? You feel free to ask any questions that you have. All right. So when we're doing a comparable, if I have a ranch, can I use a raised ranch as a comparable?
You can if you absolutely have to. I would rather use a ranch and a ranch. If I have to, and it's a particular neighborhood, I'll go further back in time. I'll make sure that my market data supports, whether there needs to be a time adjustment or whether, if the market has increased or decreased. For the most part, I have seen a very flat market here. So in many cases, I'm comfortable going back a year, maybe 2 years if I need to find a really appropriate, good comparable sale. Sometimes the older sale is the better sale than the newer one that's not really as appropriate.
Okay, so maybe I might have said, how about comparing a Cape to a ranch? Is that a
Yeah.
worse comparison?
You have to do it sometimes. I mean, like I always say in all the presentations I give to agent offices, it's not like we live in Vegas or California. If you've ever flown into Vegas and that pilot dips his wing to the left-hand side and you see row after row after row of the same houses, I think to myself, that's got to be what appraiser's heaven looks like. It's just everything is the same. But we don't have that here. We have houses built in the 1700s, 1800s. So yeah, sometimes you have to take a Cape for a ranch. Sometimes, especially in a town like Suffield, I just did an appraisal there. I apologize for my dog. She's going to start to bark because I'm in here and she's in there and she doesn't like it.
I'll invite her in.
If it were only so easy, I would. She'd stop barking. But I just did an appraisal in Suffield where my ranch was like 1,300 square feet. And Suffield is a lot of big colonials, newer, and I didn't have any other comps, so I had to take a Cape, and it adjusted out perfectly. So, in that case, it was absolutely appropriate to do so because I didn't have anything else.
Okay, so different people use appraisals for different things. I think that you mentioned to me at one point that you've got clients that are using them for to contest their real estate taxes.
Mm. Yeah, I did a lot of tax appeal work this year.
Okay, and then I guess that your biggest call is people who are getting mortgages. So banks are ordering it from you. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I do a lot of lender work, but I actually do more private work, more divorce, estate,
Oh,
for probate, pre-listing, for agents, exactly that. So I do a good mix of things. I don't have all my eggs kind of in the lender basket. Kind of
that's
learned the
good.
hard way that it's a good idea to diversify because if that lender stuff goes away, you need something else. So, and I really enjoy the more challenging tax appeals and that kind of thing.
Okay, so I guess that the next question I have is what makes a good comparable? And let me know when you want me to pull up one of your slides.
Yeah, that slide, that one that says what is a comparable would be perfect to pull up at this point. Um, you know, a, a comparable is really one that is substitutable for the subject, right? So, is it similar in location? Is it similar in marketability? Is it in the same school district? Is it, sometimes those factors are very important. In the early 2000s, in West Hartford, there were certain elementary school districts that were really hot and, everybody wanted to buy there. So, that would be a consideration for a comparable sale. Similar amenities, which is a little bit less important, but similar in style, size, and age are really the most important and most heavily weighted as far as, when you're trying to decide what to take. I think you have to be careful with comparables because sometimes neighborhoods change street to street. So, you have to really know your market and you have to understand where those pockets of areas are that, maybe a better comparable sale or a better market comparison than another one.
Okay, because I can remember, I'm not sure it's like this now, but a couple of years ago, I was driving through, say, Bridgeport, Connecticut, and one of the neighborhoods I had been interested at the time was Maplewood in the West End, and I found that I drive maybe 10 blocks from one end to the other, and
Yep.
I'd see the neighborhoods improve. I'd see them go down. I'd see them improve again.
Absolutely.
Do you see that too?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's what comes from knowing the market. If you want to put up that other slide, Ed, I think that shows that pretty well. It's sometimes neighborhood by neighborhood, sometimes it's street by street. I think the slide that it has, I did a search. It was comping out a raised ranch in Bloomfield. And my subject was on one side and I was pulling up comps on the other side and, all over the place just to see what the market looked like. And the sale prices, there was such a huge difference between where my subject was. Oh, there you go. Where my subject was, you can see the sales are, 255, 235, 259, right where my subject was. If you look over on the right side, they're 165, 174. So again, knowing your market, knowing your neighborhoods, knowing, what is truly comparable and what is not is so important to accurately pricing listings.
So what do you typically use as a line of demarcation? Because here we've got what are we using? Actually, I believe it or not, I can't see them where I am.
Oh,
so
it's okay. Sometimes it's major boundaries. Sometimes it's a man-made. Sometimes it's a highway. Sometimes it's an exit ramp to the highway. Sometimes it's close to public transportation. Certain neighborhoods are set up with certain amenities and certain abilities and certain closeness to shopping or that kind of thing. It's really, you have to know the neighborhood itself. Like I said, sometimes it's a river, sometimes it's just a main street, and on one side of the street is one thing, and on one side of the street it's a whole nother market.
So if you want to get an accurate answer, are you going to drive and look at each of those properties?
Oh, most definitely. Appraisers always go and look at the comps directly. They take pictures, they look at the neighborhoods. Absolutely. You can't tell from a Google map. Sometimes they could be in close proximity to a high tension wire, where you would not know that if you were just looking at a picture on MLS or a picture on Google, or, whatever the case may be. So yeah, there are all sorts of external factors that, make this a good comp or a bad comp. And I think the important part is, look at your results. Sometimes I'll just run a result of a whole neighborhood and I'll filter out what looks right, what doesn't look right, what's, kind of consistent. And the ones that aren't, I'll ask why, and sometimes it's in some external factor that it's next to a gas station, but that's nowhere listed in MLS. So you wouldn't know. So absolutely important. Every appraiser goes and takes original photos of their comparable sales.
Okay. So we've talked, I think so far we've been talking about sale prices. Is sale prices the only thing that you look at?
No, definitely not. I mean, all of the factors that I mentioned before are really important. I think one of the things that often gets overlooked for data that's very important is active listings. The principle of substitution says someone is not going to pay more for one house than they are for another. If you look at those active listings and you say, hey, I'm, looking to price my house here, but I've got other houses that are updated, renovated, in better condition, maybe larger, and they're listed at a certain price point where I was going to list my house, which has not been updated, is smaller, whatever the case may be. It's important to see what the competition is. It's also important to look at expireds too. I mean, when I give my presentations, I show an example of 3 houses on one street. 2 of them were on the market, one of them expired, and clearly the one that expired is still the high end of the market, and yet there are listings out there that are higher. So all of that data shows such a great picture of the market, which is so important to know.
Okay. And of course, different people are going to use that data differently. As an investor, what I'm often most interested in is the ARV, the after resale value. Yep. And that's what it's going to be worth after I fix it up. Yep. So I'm going to want to look at pictures, since I can't, of the current of current active listings, yep, of expireds, yep, and of sales. And so I can see by the pictures where they updated this century.
Yeah, exactly. Appraisers always look at the interior photos, both of the comparables, of the actives, of the expireds, because it's all telling a picture. Every bit of that you can put together and it tells an awesome picture of the market. And the deeper you can delve into it and the deeper you can look at it, the better understanding that you'll get of where you can price your listing or where you can buy your house for, renovation, and, what is your high end, what are you going to get out of it. All of that information is just so important.
Okay, and if you've joined us live, feel free. The only way I'm gonna know you were here is if you give me a comment or give me a like. Okay, we've got a question. Let me see if I can put that question up. So Victor asks, outside of the MLS, what are some secondary sites do you tend to use?
Go to town hall and I'll see what has sold there. The thing that I don't like particularly about that is that I don't know the circumstances. I don't know, whether it was arm's length. I don't know the condition, that kind of thing. So I, as much as I want to go and I do look, it doesn't always give me the best picture. I mean, MLS to me is one of the best ways to look. If I'm going to do a multi-family or a single family, MLS is my most complete source of information.
Okay. So what you're saying is that a house that isn't on the MLS, and houses that aren't on the MLS sell, and if they weren't listed, then they might not appear on the MLS as a sold property.
Yes.
So they're not part of your of your list of properties that you can determine.
Yeah, I'll look. I'll go to towns, and I do all the time. But I typically find that those houses that were FSBOs sell for less than they would have if they've had, typical market exposure, from an agent. And again, I don't know what the condition of the interior was, so I'm reluctant. If I can find something on MLS where I've got some concrete information and I can look at the pictures and I can see what the interior looked like, I'm much happier as an appraiser looking at that hardcore data than I am, some kind of unknown.
Okay. Kate, are there other sites on the internet that you can find this information? If maybe, I know there are FSBOs that list, for instance, on Zillow.
Yes.
Is there information that you can get from that that you can't find on the MLS sometimes?
I'm sure Zillow has. I mean, they have the exact same information. If you don't have access to MLS, Zillow is, just don't use their Zestimates. That's the only only thing. No Zestimates. No.
Okay.
Zestimates.
Well, I actually, when you were talking about Zestimates before, I guess, or rather, you were talking about flying into, for instance, Las Vegas.
Yeah.
When you fly into Las Vegas and you see tracts of houses where there's 100 of them that are all the same, then you know that they're pretty much gonna be about the same age and about the same condition.
Yeah.
So you can get a lot more data from that.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, that's perfect. We don't have that here. That's awesome data, that kind of thing.
And I'm guessing that Zillow is much more accurate in areas like that, except for, well, here, if you look into cities, there's been very little development since I mean, you can find some that are a little bit newer, but they might be the 30s, the 40s or 50s, or back into the century before that.
Yep. Yeah, that's why, taking accurate comparable sales is, doing your research, looking into the market. That's why that's the key to everything. That's the key to accurate pricing. And that's the key to having more confidence whether the house is going to appraise for the sale price or not.
Okay. And just a quick break. We are talking to appraiser Tammy Heeber. If you are watching live on Facebook, you can ask questions. We'll answer them. The place where this has been shared to different places. As a matter of fact, maybe you can, if you think that there's somebody who you think should see this, share it on their timeline or share it on your own timeline. If you're here, I can't always see who you are. If you actually, the thing is that they've changed some things at Facebook. If you're a friend of mine, I can see who you are. If you're not a friend, then I can't see anything about you. Give me a like. please ask me a question. If you're watching on Facebook, either live or on the replay, then just write something down there. If you write in and maybe someone can do it now just to make sure it's working for me. If you write in dog, DOG, either capital or small or capitalize the first letter, doesn't matter. If you write DOG, then we'll put you on the list to hear when we go live. So you'll get a message every time we go live. Okay, and back to Tammy. So, Tammy, you want to give us your do you want anything else that you want to add that we can look at or that we missed?
One of the things that I discourage looking at is price per square foot. The appraiser cannot. I'm often handed comps based on price per square foot. These comps are similar in price per square foot to this listing. Generally, an appraiser can't do that. Remember, the definition of good comparable sale is one that is substitutable. When you research by price per square foot, you're looking at the entire property as a whole: the acreage, the house, the condition of the house, the number of baths, the garage, whatever amenities there may be. When an appraiser is appraising a property, they're looking at each individual amenity. They're looking at 1 acre versus 15 acres. I give a good example in my presentations that shows 2 houses in Simsbury. One sold for $400,000, one sold for $200,000, and they were both around $105.37 a square foot. Clearly not comparable at all, but had the similar, price per square foot, which, again, doesn't really work out. It doesn't reflect comparables in the way that we have to.
Okay, so I guess numbers that I see a lot are ranches that are 1,100 feet and ranches or a cape that's 1,100 and 1,600. You wouldn't want to use. Would you want to use those as comparables in any way?
I mean, if I have to, and I can adjust for them, I can. Okay. If it's a limited market and those are my best comps, again, we don't live in Vegas. We don't have those model matches that other markets have. If that's all I have, then yes, that's what I'll use, and then I'll adjust for it. But it's not what I'm looking for immediately. I'm looking for something more, much closer to the subject. Again, the least amount of adjustments that you have to do, the better the comparable.
So you talk about adjustment. So if I have a house with, let's say I've got 1.5 baths in my house, and the one that's sold next door is similar, but had 2 full baths. Mm-hmm. How would you determine what the price was for those 2 houses?
Well, it really depends on the market because every market reacts differently. It's like in the Facebook group, I'm often asked, what's the value of a half bath? And I have to say it depends on the market. That's always my answer. They'll ask me, what's the value of a garage? Well, where is a garage more valuable? Would it be New York City or would that be Maine? And it's the same thing in the state. Where's a garage more valuable? Greenwich or East Hartford or East Hartford and Ellington. So again, it's knowing the market and it's being able to extrapolate that data and that adjustment that will tell you what that is worth. That unfortunately is a little bit much to go into here, but if somebody wants to email me, I'll be happy to send some information.
So would you look for the difference in prices of a different kind of house between 1.5 and 2 to extrapolate?
Yes, you can do group sales. Absolutely. You can do a group sales analysis, that groups everything and throw out the outliers so that you can begin to get an idea of what the difference would be. You can do paired sales. I did an example of a paired sales analysis where I was trying to decide, discern what the value of an oceanfront property was. And, one property sold for $250,000, one sold for $350,000. The $350,000, they were almost exactly the same house. The $350,000 was waterfront. The $250,000 one was across the street. What's the value of the waterfront? $100,000. That's what you would adjust any comp to.
Okay, so we're talking about not only of the demarcation could be an area where the closer you are to the demarcation, the more expensive or the less expensive. So in this case, the closer you are to waterfront, And I guess that the one across the street probably would sell for more than the exact same house that was behind that house.
Yes, exactly right. And again, you could easily extrapolate that data if you had really good comparable sales and compared them and to see what is the market reaction to that, farther in distance, or again, with a bath or with a garage. You can use all of that data to extrapolate what your adjustment would be.
Okay, so I guess one other thing that we see a lot is flood zones, especially since 2012 when they redid them.
Yep.
So I'm going to say, well, what's a flood zone worth? And you're going to say, well, it depends on where it is, and we've got to do a comparison.
Yeah.
But do you find there's a big difference between being in a flood zone and being outside the flood zone?
I have seen more a lack of marketability than I have a huge price difference. I've seen that the ones in the market, in the flood zone, definitely seem to take longer to market. That's a blanket statement that I'm not really comfortable making, but just as a general thing, that's what I've seen. There has been some dollar amount of reaction between the two, most definitely. But what that would be, again, I couldn't say without doing the research and doing the paired sales and that kind of thing. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, that's where it's a perfect example of appropriate comparable sales. Your subject is in a flood zone, find comps in a flood zone. Again, it's what's the defining factor of your subject. In this case, it would be a flood zone. If it was a house built in 1800s, it would be an antique house. If it's a house on a lake, it would be the lake part. So you need to know what your really defining factor of that house is, and find other comparables with that similar factor.
Now, do you find that for instance, antique houses are selling for a lot less than non-antique? Well, I know that you can't. Depends on the market.
Yeah, it depends on the market. Yeah, I just did one in Glastonbury not too long ago, and it absolutely sold for maybe even a little bit more than a similar newer home would have sold for. So, and again, that really appeals to a specific market segment, right? Somebody who likes those wide plank floors, who likes that. Who maybe a beehive oven or that kind of thing. Again, you better to compare like with like if you can. That's a perfect example of, I would rather go further back in time and find good comparable sales than I would take a sale that really wasn't as appropriate or as similar in marketability.
Okay. Anything else that you want to add?
I don't know what else we talked about. I think that was pretty much it.
Okay. So you want to tell us about your website, and you're coming up with a course that you're going to be selling.
Yep.
And who the course is for.
Yeah, it's almost done. It's a lot of the information that I give in my presentations. I do a lot of presentations at agents' offices, but it's more in depth. It's got a lot of examples and workbook kind of things, so that you can get a good feel for how to price things and how, not necessarily how the appraiser will look at it, but how to really delve into the market in a deeper way to be more comfortable pricing listings. So it would be great for agents. It'll be great for investors. And like I said, it just goes into a deeper look in the market than, and it also covers things like who owns the appraisal, and that type of thing. Most people think that if they paid, the buyer pays for the appraisal, they own it, but they don't. The lender owns it. So we also cover that kind of material. I also have a Facebook page, a free Facebook page for agents and investors. It's called Appraisers Helping CT Real Estate Agents. So if anybody would like to join, please feel free to do so. And
that's a Facebook group.
Yep.
Group. So you can, if you go to Appraisers
helping CT real estate agents. I have to think about it.
All right. Yes. Okay. So if you you search for that on Facebook and you go there and ask to join, it's a place where you can ask questions and she answers them, and other people people say some people say some crazy, some people on there are very knowledgeable and some people aren't. And I guess there's no dumb questions. So please ask questions.
Yeah.
And basically that's why we're here. Yeah. I guess, by the way, I'm speaking with Appraiser Tammy Heeber, and the reason why I decided to bring Tammy on is because I see a lot of people who are using a lot of weird values, and I can't figure out how they came up with that value on a piece of real estate that they're trying to sell. And this is for real estate agents or for investors. One of the things that we do if we're going to fix a house and sell it, some people call it flipping. You have to know what the after repair value is, and you have to know how much it's going to cost to repair it. And those two numbers, if you list an aftermarket value that's a reasonable number, and you list how much it really cost to fix up that house, and if you list how much you want it, and those numbers really make sense, and I've done other interviews where we've talked about coming up with the maximum allowable offer, that's the MAO, then and you post that online, your house is really going to sell very quickly to investors. So to go back to I guess what we're going to do is wrap some things up. So thank you very much, Tammy, for spending this time with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I'm Ed Weinberg. We're just done, and if you're watching, you'll find this video at the same the same place, which is there should be a bit.ly address above, and you can find it there. Please feel free to join us at CT at the Facebook group CTRE Investors, and just go there. You please answer a couple of questions, and we okay your membership. And there we go. I'm back. Again, if you'd like to know when we go live, just type dog, DOG, below, and follow the rules it sets up, and then you'll hear every time we go live. This is Ed Weinberg for CTRE Media, and have a great night.